gentlemen, welcome back to another installment of the Rufus Rundown. Kicking it off with the second episode of the day for myself, which will actually be available for you on the day of the first game of the World Series, joined this time by special guest Andrew Whinney. I've worked with Andrew at Holy Cross now and kicked it off with a quick friendship and co-workership, you could say, and big baseball guy, formerly at Holy Cross, and also a big Phillies fan, so kind of a tough day for him here. But Andrew, I'm going to let you introduce yourself a little bit before we get into today's show.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lucas. So yeah, like Lucas said, we've been working together for, I think, only 3 months now. But there's a lot of downtime, and when you're surrounded by sports, it's hard not to talk about it, and it's hard not to bring up me being a Phillies fan. So so me personally, I'm a junior at Holy Cross. I'm a psychology major. I played 1 year of college ball here, encountered some difficulties with mental health, and decided to step away to focus on academics and bettering myself. And now with that, I'm looking to get into sports psychology so I can hopefully help other athletes maintain a healthy relationship with their sport and also succeed and thrive while they do play it. Like I said, I'm a Philly sports fan, grew up in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Parents still live there, so plenty of pain going on right now, but gonna try to talk through it. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
I guess coming from the psych background, best case is now to be able to talk it out, and
Yep.
get it out,
You'd be correct.
Get it out there into the world.
Everyone else is going to be repressing it for 4 months. So, yeah.
I saw a video where they, everything's like scripted in this world too with social media too. And I saw a video where there was a bunch of Philly fans leaving. And they were just like all pissed off, swearing, like typical of like the Philadelphia fan base that you would assume that you would see. Of course, it's scripted, so like anybody saying anything nice was pretty much just cut from the tape. So of course there's both sides of it, because like I said, I saw that heartfelt one that I had on there too about Aaron Nola and stuff like that too. So there's both sides of the coin. With passion comes a lot of two sides of the coin there, a lot of the double-edged sword with passion, where it's like it's good to have the loudest ballpark in like ever. That was like ridiculous what they were able to do in terms of fan support. Then also you see the anger and frustration leaving the ballpark too, where it's like, well, that's a little far, you're overstepping a little bit.
Yeah, everyone copes differently, and I think people know how Philly copes because we've been so bad in every sport for so long, so it gets displayed.
You see, like, they were greasing the poles. They're greasing the poles, so it was like you could see.
They're greasing the poles for Game 6. For Game 6. Yep, they were greased for Game 6. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Maybe we should stop doing that. Maybe we should stop. Yeah, for more reasons than one. It's bad.
It's like, let's, before we protect the city from destruction, let's make sure it deserves like some form of destruction. I get it. You want to save the city, but at the same time, it's like, you don't want to manifest something bad. I am a big believer in the powers of manifestation. So if you're prepping for the destruction of your city for victory in advance, it might not end well for you overall. So, but that's either here nor there. We'll get into the entire breakdown. First, I want to go with, this has been making the rounds on social media with the kid who, I believe, from like the perspective that I saw, was trying to walk on.
Yes, definitely.
To a Division I program is like what I would be. So anyways, like he posted out saying, hey, I didn't make my college baseball team with a broken heart, which, it's when you have to like meet the end there, like you move on to slow pitch softball or coaching, whatever it may be, probably a hard internal dialogue. But like the coach, like, people are saying this is harsh. Anyways, I'll read the email that he posted, the image that said, thanks for reaching out. You're not kept past the tryout based on ability. As I mentioned at the tryout, we'd only retain people if we thought they would be able to help us win games this year. We did not feel that way based on your tryout. As for the future, your ability was very, very far away from being considered to be part of our roster. Of course, I have to emphasize it there because that's how it reads, Your fastball is around 68, 70 miles per hour. Our players are usually 88, 90 at a minimum. Your offensive performance was equally distant from what it takes to be a part of our team. Being perfectly honest, playing college baseball is not a realistic expectation for you, especially at the Division I level. I apologize for the bluntness, but I feel that honesty is important here. Thanks again for your interest, and I hope your classes are going well this fall. So I'll let you start with your thoughts on that there in terms of, so like, again, like consideration into like that statement on its own, if I just read it off, people would have no idea, but this is being considered like, did the coach go too far territory, which I think is wild, but I'll let you start. Like, so like just setting the scene with that, like, was that too much?
The extremely short answer is no. I mean, the fact that this was described as going viral, this email, I can't help but feel like there was some satire missed here. I mean, if you look, this kid's throwing 68 to 70. And I'm not trying to layer it on this kid, because if he, did have aspirations, that's sad. Like, yeah, it's a sad thing. I saw 80% of my high school teammates encounter the same thing. But at the same time, 68 to 70 that's what you generally expect with middle schoolers. Like, actually, I'm not saying that as like a jab. Like, that is generally what you expect from an advanced middle schooler. And so that's one side of that is, okay, maybe this kid's being a little facetious here. Maybe he tried out as a joke, because that's kind of reflected in the statistics. Whatever the case may be, this coach would probably not be described as a hardo by anybody who spent any time in college athletics. He apologized at the end of his email. How often do you have a college coach apologize for laying into a kid? The answer is not very often, for as nice as some coaches may come off. But yeah, this was just, I think, undeserving of the reaction it got. The coach didn't say anything that wasn't true. He didn't say anything personal. He didn't say anything about the kid as a person. That's kind of the territory where you get into hardo stuff, so to speak. But yeah, just strange that Barstool would pick that up.
Yeah, that's where it was centered. Then I saw the baseballer posted it on Instagram, and I saw it on multiple platforms, which is where I was starting to like okay, like when I read it, and I was like, I mean, like, not ideal. I mean,
no,
ideal,
of course not.
Not ideal, but like let's look at reality here. Like, I've played Division III sports, and I think now working at a Division I school, like, if I had aspirations at one point in my life of playing Division I sports. Of course, injuries, everything happened, but even then, before the injuries, I never possessed the speed nor athletic ability to play Division I football, size probably included. And then working as a field camera, you work the same camera. I'm looking in the eyes of these athletes, and I'm like, nah, like, I never had it. Like, not only did I not have, like, the physical ability, I'm just looking at how these dudes are wired up top, like, through a camera lens, and it is just, no, I don't belong. And that's just on that perspective. Never mind this. That's why I'm calling games now already and no longer playing the sport. And you're topping out, like you said, at a middle school speed. Now, you throw a knuckleball. Maybe you mix the knuckleball in if you're throwing there.
Maybe.
If he's really serious about it, you might want to really consider learning a new pitch that, you don't have the velocity. I mean, Tim Wakefield, rest in peace as of recently. Like, there's some other guys, Ari Dickey. Like, you see the journeys of some of those guys that have tried the different pitches and different journey. Go watch a Rocky movie. Yeah, sure. Give it a bit. Like, a satire aside, like you said, like, very well at this point, like, it could have been a joke, which would. But then this picking up the type of reaction it did, it was like, I'm confused. If it was a joke, you would have hoped that they saw through that, considering how, all right, I'm just gonna say it, soft, like, the entire, like, engagement was in comparison to them saying it was harsh. I don't know. Like, sometimes you just got to know. So I feel like
there's a disconnect, I think, between maybe what the average college student. I mean, I think a couple weeks ago, my professor, we had 2 articles to read for class, and it became very clear not long into the discussion that not that many people had read the articles, and my professor was extremely calm, extremely collected, was very understanding, said, I know you guys have so much going on. I don't want this to be a normal thing. I'm going to let you go early and let you go read it so that you have time to do it. This isn't supposed to be like a, getting on you thing, whatever. He's so nice. And I mean, everyone looked traumatized. And I was like, wait, this is like so cozy, so feel good. I think it's easy to take for granted, as an athlete and ex-athlete, the level of, I don't know if there's a word, sub-abuse, but verbal, maybe beratement, that you become desensitized to after a certain point. Didn't really notice that until the combination of that class and this article. So
I would say just as a whole, like, growing up, like, my parents had expectations for me too, and they'd have been bluntly honest with me as well too, with, like, reality of stuff too. So of course, pursue your dreams and all that too. Like I said, you can watch all the motivational tapes in the world. Like, go read a David Goggins book. Like, I'm all for it. But, like, if you're topping out at 70, like, you got to work a lot harder, or you got to really figure something out. So, like I said, the satire aside there, like, I've heard worse, and I would like to think that I played at a decently high level when I was, playing at a certain thing, and I've heard, way worse myself. So it was like, I don't know if this is where we're heading culturally wise, not to get it political, but maybe it is, maybe, I don't know, but yeah, kind of a strange one. But wanted your thoughts on that, because I'm obviously making the rounds on social media. It pops up and you're like, oh, I guess that's worth talking about. Yeah, but kind of But I had mentioned too, like that the Texas coach basically went in and called him worthless, and then they just went on and won the
Yeah,
national.
it got personal. It got personal. Yeah, and it worked, and then they won the national championship. So,
So if that's harsh, I don't know what you would call the Texas guy, and that's a guy who won a national championship. So I don't know where you go from there. I'm saying, like, I think we're starting to kind of like lessen up like what our expectations are for a lot of the stuff. Like you said, even at like the college level, like in the class, like I think just at certain points you just become more adjusted. You grow a thicker skin. And if you don't, then the Division I level,
not
for
you.
Quite there. I mean, it's not like the kid particularly in his like response said like, "Oh, this was like hurtful." It was just like picked it up. So I'm sure Dave Porter will have something to say to whatever employee decided to pick it up. But anyways, we'll move on to the Championship Series and kind of recapping those. For the two teams that lost, obviously, because we'll be able to get into the two teams that did advance. We'll start with your Phillies and reaction as a fan, and I will say an educated fan. Andrew's very well versed and well educated. This is not coming from a homer's perspective. This is coming from a true. I mean, he is a fan overall, but
of course,
this is coming from someone who knows what they're talking about, as opposed to someone who's just like gonna absolutely rip apart everything no matter what. But obviously, considering they had,
I think you'll find that both can be true. So
considering the lead in the series and where they were at points, I would say there is some stuff that's worthy of ripping apart. So I'll let you. Basically, what did you think went wrong with the Phillies, and how did this happen?
I think the only way to approach it rationally without immediately getting emotional about guys slumping and guys selling to Vegas and calling in wins, whatever it may be. I think the key difference between Philly and Arizona, particularly in the back half of the series, was adjustability. And that you can chalk up to many things. Obviously, the players at the end of the day have the final say in terms of what adjustments they make and what information they consume. But then it also falls on analytics departments and on coaches and on teammate relationships. I mean, most of the important information you get, probably a majority, comes from talking to guys in between at bats, talking to guys as you're warming up in the field. That's extremely valuable information. And in a 7-game set, when you're seeing the same guy twice, especially when you have success off of him in the first time, you have to expect him to change. And if he's going to change and you don't change, it's fairly obvious things aren't going to go your way. And that's exactly what. So, as you watch, particularly Merrill Kelly, I think, is the peak example of that, given he did have a decent first start, but obviously a loud start for the Phillies, 2 home runs pretty early on. He came back out and he looked like Roger Clemens. And you have to ask yourself, why? How does that happen in the span of one start? And I think the answer is, and we'll get into this more as we discuss the World Series matchup, Arizona not only has absolutely fantastic top 1% coaches, but also a very potent analytics department and a head coach in Torey Lovullo who's willing to make adjustments and not put all his eggs in one basket in one approach. So I think that's the key thing.
Yeah, I mean, I had the pleasure of watching Lovullo manage the Red Sox for a period of time too, and I kind of thought, like, obviously Alex Cora's had a terrific tenure, but I thought that was kind of someone that kind of slipped through our fingers, all things considered, with everything that went down. But yeah, I mean, Merrill Kelly came out, made those comments too about Citizens Bank, and like, nah, I think the World Baseball Classic was louder. And at that time, I was like, dude, not the way to go. Because I'm not a Patriots fan, but being from New England, I saw what they did to Patriots fans in that Super Bowl, and just how they can get, not disrespectfully, just in terms of like support wise, like I don't think that's a position you want to put yourself in. Never mind while poking the bear into doing it, but then he comes out on the other side. I know Zach Gallen was kind of talking a little bit. I think he posted something about spring training tickets on like Twitter. He sent like a link to somebody, which I don't know if that's the guy that I'd be like, I would be like chirping that much. I mean, there's plenty of players in the Diamondbacks that I think could chirp, but he wasn't particularly one of the standouts for them. But overall, I mean, Ginkel kind of did his thing for them as well too, and the bullpen was strong. And I think at this point, any team's going to have a strong bullpen. I mean, pitching in the bullpen's a big thing. Like, the offensive explosions will happen, I think, just overall in terms of, because like you said, seeing a guy twice in a series, like, that comes down more to pitching than anything. Like, if you're a hitter, obviously there's a lot of work that goes into the film room and, like you said, the analytics department. But I think overall it's more on the pitchers, because you're seeing so much of someone in a short period of time, where it's like that's more, I think, more pressure on the pitcher to make adjustments. I think it's a little more difficult for pitchers to make traditional adjustments than it would be on the other half of like hitters doing it. I think hitters can be more reactive in at bats and can not really like adjust their swing, but like when their eye levels adjusted and stuff. I think it's like fouling off pitches. Like they're more prone to look for their pitch, and it's easier for a pitcher to make that mistake, especially with the pitch clock now and no shifts in terms of where they're pitching to. So I think it leans a little more offensively. So like you said, in terms of the adaptability of what they were able to do, obviously being able to come out on top, but again, some big spots. I think the Phillies too, where you would look for some of your reliable guys to come through too. Obviously, a guy for the Diamondbacks, Ketel Marte, came up pretty big for them, time and time again. Not just in that series, but overall, like in the playoffs. I mean, he's still hitting over 300 in the playoffs, which is a good number. I mean, Corbin Carroll is another guy that you mentioned too, or I haven't mentioned. We had mentioned, talking pre-show in terms of what they were able to do. They've shown power obviously at times overall, but this is a team. Their highest paid player, it was designated for assignment. Madison Bumgarner was designated for assignment in April. They were 6 games over 500 in the regular season. Highest paid player is not in the roster. They said we're going to pay you the most on this team to not play for us. So not on their roster, and again, still able to come through. So it's a really, really cool story overall. Of course, I saw their social media team put together a video with like Russo as well too. Like Chris Russo was like, I will retire tomorrow if they move on. So I'm never opposed to the underdog as much as I do have a respect for the Phillies. But again, is it more of a blame thing for you? Like, is it more of like obviously from a fan's perspective it's difficult, but is it more of the Phillies lost this, or is it more of a credit to the Diamondbacks for doing it, or is it kind of a little bit of both?
I think I'll recognize my bias here, but I think especially evidenced by the 2-0 lead early on and the dominance Philly showed in game 1 and 2, this was their series to lose. And it was their series to lose since they beat the Braves. I mean, just objectively, to shut down one of the greatest offenses of all time and then get blown up by the Arizona Diamondbacks, 84 wins, it's just not acceptable. I think you have to bring up Craig Kimbrell. Obviously, game 6 and 7 were ugly, but when you have one guy almost single-handedly blow 2 games in the same 7-game set, it's just not acceptable. And I think part of the blame for Kimbrell can also be directed towards Rob Thompson, because Rob Thompson has historically been extremely, extremely loyal to Craig Kimbrell, and not always it's not always warranted. And it certainly wasn't warranted when he put him back in game 4 after losing us game 3. So obviously you have to bring him up. And I think one major statistic, if you're going to talk about money, that you have to bring up, as much as I hate to, is we spent $800 million plus, I think 823 is the number, on Schwarber, Castellanos, Harper, and Turner, who went a combined 1 for 23 in games 6 and 7. Many runners left on base. You have to think about the 8th inning, or the 7th inning rather, with Harper and Turner both going hitless with runners on first and second. It's just not acceptable. It's just not acceptable if you're going to dish out that much money and those guys aren't going to come up when it matters. They seem to only be able to pile on once one guy has taken the mantle, in that 10-0 game and some of their high-scoring games against the Braves. Guys have to be willing to step up on their own. And obviously, I played baseball for a long time. I played at a high level. I understand that you can't just will yourself to come through in those situations. It's not that simple. But especially when you've seen these bullpen guys multiple times, guys like Ginkel, who is fantastic, by the way. We'll get into Ginkel later on when we talk World Series, because I think very, very highly of him, and I wish he was wearing a Phillies uniform. But when you have many, many opportunities, bases loaded, first and second, whatever it may be, the expectation has to be that one of those guys is going to come through to some extent. It doesn't have to be a grand slam. It doesn't have to be a home run. Somebody has to keep the line. They just didn't have that.
It takes the pressure off of pitchers as well, too. And again, Kimbrell kind of the single-handedly self-destruct button there. But he's a Dombrowski guy, too. Don't forget either. Mm-hmm. So Dombrowski went after him with the Red Sox and has made another move for him, too. So that might not be totally on Thompson, too. It might be kind of considered into like the whole whatever algorithm they have going there, too. I mean, it might have been kind of like, hey, we made this move for this guy. Like, Dombrowski wants this guy doing this. So that might have been like an upper management move, too. But yeah, overall, when you win game 2 10-0, you have to think you're up 2-0 after a 10-0 victory. Like, how do you not capture it from there? But again, you figure the Diamondbacks were working for one there, and you win. Not only do you win game 2 10-0, you win game 5 6-1. So again, you were in the driver's seat multiple times in that series. But then like 6 and 7, when like you said that the money there with the lack of performance from those guys, like, and I'm a big Harper guy. Harper's I've always seen as clutch, emotional leader. Everything that Trey Turner's done since the standing ovation, which I thought was awesome. Everything they did there. Schwarber, just a kid from Waltham, doing his thing. I mean, I was shocked with how that whole entire result went down, and unfortunate for the Phillies overall. But obviously, they'll have to find a way to regroup and respond. Like I said, credit when credit's due to Arizona. They had a lot of different guys doing it. Like you said, passing the baton's a big deal for what they do, and for any team getting that deep. And they didn't get there by accident at this point, but. And you can only so many times say, like, hey, like, this team kind of gave it away, opposed to, like, the team barely creeped into the playoffs is what they did. But, I mean, once all the 100 team, like, you had to expect some type of chaos with this entire playoffs, considering all the 100-win teams just went down like that. You just snapped your fingers, you looked away. Like, if you're a non-traditional baseball person, we're like, hey, I'm going to check into the baseball playoffs, like, after the wild card. Like, oh, what teams do we have? Like, all the 100-win teams are gone. You're, like, looking at it, like, kind of sideways, like, what happened? How did we get here? So to see it continue like that, it's not entirely shocking, but then again, from, like, considering, like, the baseball royalty that is Philly and what the city has going for them right now, was certainly surprising to see overall, at least for myself. And I do have a soft spot for the Phillies. The powder blues, man, the blue uniforms, you can't.
So clean.
How do you not like those? How do you not like those? So,
yeah, I know. I wish we wore them more often. It's only Thursday home games is the only time, and it makes you wonder, game 6 or 7, if we break those out. I like our chances better. But I think there's a bigger conversation to be had there. What you were saying about the 100-win teams, it brings up how indicative of a team's postseason reliability or success comes from the regular season. Increasingly in past years, it's not much. And is that a healthy thing? I don't really know. Chaos is great and it's entertaining if you're not, the greater Philadelphia area. But it does make you wonder, is our current format, not just of the postseason, but of the regular season too, is this really putting teams in a position to succeed in the postseason based on their performance in the regular season? There was sort of a conversation going on about the break between the end of the regular season and the first game of the division series for those 100-win teams. I don't buy into that because there's just not historical data to back that up as a phenomenon where taking a break has such a consistent and universal negative effect on a team. I don't think that that needs to be gotten rid of immediately. I don't think that's as simple as it gets. I think there may be a finger to point the length of the regular season. Some teams are built for those short bursts of success and don't have the longevity to keep that going over a 162-game span. They may not make the playoffs. There could be teams that didn't make the playoffs this year that could have won a pennant if they hit their stride at the right time. The Diamondbacks are evidence of that. Could have been the Brewers. It could have been the Marlins. There were plenty of teams like that. So it's entertaining, certainly, but it does, I think, raise a larger conversation about the format of the Major League Baseball season as a whole.
I talked about it with Chris Kostic for a little bit too, and he's like even an old head with baseball too, because I'm kind of old fashioned with how my baseball works too. So like one of the episode 26, I want to say, of this present season, I talked to Chris about it, and like, of course they've thrown a couple things out there. It was basically like you play the first game of the 3-game set for the wild card like one day, and the next second and third game is a double header. So you get the travel day and then you go, and then you have like, you don't really get like the rest. So like you don't have the privilege of getting into that rhythm with the rest of the travel in between going into those series. That was one thing. I've always said that if you're going to add more playoff teams, you should probably shorten the regular season because you need to make it matter more. I'm a big European soccer fan, and relegation's a pretty cool aspect. Now, I'm not saying I don't want playoffs because playoffs are obviously instrumental to, American sports, but the idea that if you don't perform, you drop a league was pretty cool. And like the fact that every game matters. There's no playoffs. Every single game, you play each team twice, home and away, and that's how the season breaks down. Like you can't, like, having missteps, like, it's not acceptable. So you find a way to make it matter more with less of a season. or you expand. Now, this is a unique way to look at it with expanding and adding more teams. If you have more playoff teams, you add more teams. I don't know particularly where you would expand to. I'm sure
Nashville.
Nashville is what I was thinking. So you do one or two teams, you find a way to expand more. I'm sure Northeast, not really like any like true capacity for it. I know the Blue Jays were playing in that Buffalo area right during the COVID times where we couldn't travel over the border. That was a thing. They're trying to get out of Tampa, maybe bring Montreal back. You move, but then again, like, would you bring Montreal back and keep Tampa? Because Tampa's been so good. I don't really think you can move Tampa out of Tampa.
No.
I think you keep Tampa there. So you could probably, if Montreal wants to come back, you bring them back with like a Nashville. And then you kind of expand, so then it kind of equals out in terms of like how many teams make the playoffs in percentage to like whatever it is. So that kind of balances itself out a little more. And the other thing is too, like, I've always thought of realignment. There's no DH in the National League anymore. So like you have an AL and NL, but there's no difference between them. But teams are located all over for the AL and NL. Like, would you do an East-West instead of an AL-NL? That's another way, too, in terms of travel, game scheduling. Like, if you're on the East Coast, like, time slots and everything. There's a couple of ways. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, the MLB has done really good with the change they made. I'm not, like, the pitch clock and the bigger bases and no shift. Like, all of it worked. All of it worked. So I'm not saying, like, we need to change this again. Like, we need more change. Like, this needs to happen and happen now. Like, I'm not what I'm saying, because like I thought that everything that they did was even like they'd waited too long to do it, so they had to make some risky decisions now, and they all worked out, which I'm glad for, because the game grew. I mean, this was not even like subtly, like there was a like steady, physical, like tallyable like look at like the fact that baseball did have a better year in viewership than it has in years past, and it has grown as a sport. So I'm interested to see what they'll do if they do change that format. I don't know if it's going to be an overnight thing, but I've never been a fan of bringing more playoff teams in. They'll never drop playoff games once they add them, though. It's the same thing in the NFL with having another wild card. They're never going to take it back. The revenue is way too much. They make way too much money from those playoff games for them to turn away from the business aspect of it. So how do you now work the formula around to still make it stay there, but also make it more fair isn't the word that I want to use, but I guess like fair to those 100-win teams. I mean, why do you need to be fair to a 100-win team if you're that good? Just show up and play. But from like that perspective, yes, it has certainly raised some questions overall. But I'll segue it into our reaction to the Astros dropping their series. And like I'm not an anti-Astros person, because everybody has been since the sign stealing stuff. And yeah, I talked about that on my most recent show too, talking about like Michigan doing it now. Like, I'm pretty sure every team was doing it at the time that they did it, and pitchers were using stuff themselves. But again, besides the point, my defense of the Astros will go down in infamy. There's not many people that defend them, but I will. And again, they've been on a fantastic run, regardless of whatever you think of said fiasco with the sign stealing that went on and everything. Dusty Baker steps away now after a 26-year managerial career, but at least he has a World Series under his belt now. Really good run for him. But then again, what went wrong for the Astros when it was all said and done? How did this Rangers team find a way to conquer them?
I mean, to me, the bottom line for Houston, in terms of where they fell short, has to be the starting pitching. Just didn't show up. And in years past, that's been their crutch in games where their offense wasn't red hot, or when the opposing pitcher had a great game, you could very reliably get a 0 or a 1 on the scoreboard from their pitching. And Verlander, Valdez in particular, just didn't look themselves. Javier, too, in his second start. I mean, especially after me as a Phillies fan watching Javier no-hit us at home in last year's World Series, I thought he was untouchable in the playoffs. And you would have thought the same thing after the division series. It looked fantastic. But they just didn't show up. And that's not to take anything away from the Rangers. I think their offense has consistently been really great throughout the season, and most of their shortcomings have been pitching and defense related for the most part. But yeah, I mean, their offense wasn't awful. I think Yordan Alvarez definitely took a step back in the championship series, but not so big a step that he single-handedly stopped them from advancing. So I think it falls mostly on the starting pitching.
I mean, they got good production from Abreu, too. He had found a home. Altuve's always going to do his thing in big spots. I mean, look at some of the power these guys possess. Bregman, too, although his average wasn't up there, still 4 home runs over the length of the postseason. It's funny if you do, like, how ESPN kind of shuffles, like, when you look at the stats and you're doing your research like that we're doing. You look at the top of, you look at Houston Astros and their postseason stats. You look at team leaders and average home runs, RBIs, OBP, hits. the entire playoffs. It's just Yordan Alvarez, just across the board. He's really graduated from just overall being like, wow, this guy's having a really good postseason run. Just being like, wow, this dude is just an absolutely incredible baseball player. Like I said, I think I talked to you about it too, like when we were at work before, about how like they were kind of comping him to like, this isn't David Ortiz, but like we're kind of getting there a little bit.
Little Poppy, yeah.
Yeah. So I was intrigued by that, and again, even as a Sox fan, I'm like, wait, what are you talking about? What are you selling me here? But no, he's pretty legit. Like you said, the pitching, when you're giving up, double-digit runs there, you can't make it. Javier said only third of an inning, like not gonna cut it.
Not gonna work.
You'd have thought Verlander coming back would have meant something, even as late as he did make that re-entrance, and obviously in the postseason was kept his ERA under 3. But again, there's a certain energy that team is able to possess, and they just didn't have it from the past, because they had the suspension to Abreu as well too, which was mixed in there amongst everything else. But at the end of the day, no matter how good your offense is, I think anytime in a Game 7 where you're going to give up 11 runs, you're just not. It's not going to be good enough. You're not going to be able to cut it. So, no. I mean, there's been good performances, obviously, from Evaldi, and then you have Montgomery doing his thing with the Yankees, were basically just threw away for nothing, and now he's doing his thing with the Rangers, and even a little bit sweeter for me to be able to acknowledge that as a
me too
as a Sox fan, but. Again, I don't think this is necessarily one where it's like the Phillies let it go. I do think that the Rangers just outright kind of took this one. I don't think this is one that Houston threw away in the sense they battled back. I mean, Texas taking the first 2 on the road, and then once Houston took that first one back on the road, I was like, yeah, no. And again, that's something that we'd also talk about when I saw you at work, too, when they came back. After that, once they won that first game, and I was like, yeah, no, like they're gonna get the split. Like that was the only thing if they won that first game. It was either they were getting clean swept, and we were gonna be like, okay, like the Astros, like it's time to retool, refigure this out. But no, they took that first game. It was like I think it was clear at that point. Where it was like, nah, they're gonna find a way in this one. I think they truthfully are gonna find a way, and certainly did, but just weren't able to journey all the way back in that sense. So. Again, I'm more of a supporter of the Astros than most people would like to probably acknowledge, considering everything that had gone on. But at the end of the day, like I said, I thought everybody was doing it at that point. Yeah, that's kind of a different talking point. But again, we'll see what the future holds for them. In your opinion, do you think this is like the end of what has been this incredible, I guess you can call it a dynasty, right? Is this an Astros dynasty, or is this a really good run from the Astros? So two-parter. Would you call it a dynasty, or would you call it a good run?
It has to be. It has to be a dynasty. 7 championship series in a row. That I don't know how much more you can ask aside from maybe the late 90s Yankees. Mm-hmm. It's probably the best stretch we've seen since then, in my opinion. I also don't hate the Astros. I have an interesting relationship with them because my mom was an Astros fan for 35 years. She grew up in Houston. She's from Sugar Land. And so whenever everything went down, we sort of they were our number 2 team behind the Phillies. They were sort of our American League fan base. And we decided that as soon as every coach and player who was involved in 2017 leaves the roster, we can start rooting for them again. So once Altuve and Bregman are gone, we'll be back to it. But anyway, I think what determines the future for them is entirely dependent on who steps into Dusty's shoes. I think that is really going to be the deciding factor. I would have loved to see Bob Melvin take over the Astros, but he loves the West Coast and he's going to stay there. I don't really know who the Astros are looking at so far because obviously Dusty leaving is recent news, so that hasn't been floating out in the sphere. But I am definitely curious to see. I think Verlander being sort of in the twilight here is going to put some pressure on their farm system to step up and bring starting pitching because their position players are in pretty good shape, specifically with Alvarez if he sticks around. He's going to be a very major factor. But yeah, it's hard to say before you know who's going to be taking over the reins because I think that's going to have a pretty huge influence. I
mean, for me, like I would almost say like, and it's weird too because like I don't want him to go, but how everything's gone down in the front office and everything's going. I guess we just hired Craig Reslow, but Alex Cora making a return, of course, would make a lot of people sick to their stomach considering everything that went down when he was passed there. Probably the worst PR look possible. The dude can manage. Mm-hmm. I don't care. Like he can manage a ball club. And again, like not at its highest level recently, hasn't really been supplied with the best tools for the situation. But that's a guy where I could see them kind of go after, even if they have to give some capital up for it. considering where his situation right now with the Red Sox is. Like, I would have to say, like, not officially up in the air, but it's how they've treated everything is just like basically like they're just telling you we want to make a profit, but we don't want to win baseball games. It's pretty much what the Red Sox ownership has is the bill of goods that they have sold and sold fans. And again, some people they won't even pay attention to it. They're just Red Sox fans through and through, and they'll never be judge anything by it. But at the end of the day, like that's a guy that I can see fitting in there. Like Melvin, like you said, just got hired, so there's certainly going to be some names thrown around there, and I'm interested to see it because, like, again, like they have been on this incredible reign of success, and I think it's a dynasty personally. Like I said, again, this is a world that we live in now in the world of sports where people won't call it a dynasty because it's not 6 Super Bowls in a 20-year span. Like, we can't or it's not however many World Series the Yankees won. Like, I think recognizing like being so sustainably good, like not just like on and off good. Because the Red Sox are responsible for World Series, but then like being terrible the next year. Like, there's like, and having a run of a good couple of years. Like, no, this is truthfully a dynasty. I think, again, the same thing people are saying. Like, oh, the Warriors weren't a dynasty either. Like, no. Like when you win this number of championships and you're basically hunting for a championship consistently. When you're able to it's not just you like, repeating as being like dynastic in my opinion, but being able to say that you competed at that level for championships, and that means going to championship series. That means going to World Series. That is like the peak of it. Like you don't have to win every one. I mean, you have to win some, but like you don't have to win every one to be considered a true dynasty, in my opinion. Like I said, I would love to see. I mean, outside like neutral fan me would love to see Alex Cora take over there, but I'm sure that's probably not going to be their move. We'll see. I obviously nothing confirmed there as to Cora staying. There was talks about Cora moving up to the front office, and there's a whole lot of Red Sox are nothing but a whole lot of confusion in terms of the baseball world. But Alex Cora would be my pick that I would love to see be a manager over there. So we'll move it on to the World Series, from the Astros to the World Series, and we'll give you a good old World Series preview. And obviously you see the Phillies and Astros. That's a very marketable World Series. You can sell that to fans, and even like a non-traditional baseball fan, I think you can sell that too. What's your reaction to that, and like how do we sell this now with these two West Coast markets, two markets that aren't traditionally here? How do we sell that to different fans? I'm not saying like play market or here, but like just like the general question is like how do we make like obviously there's a stark contrast. Like you would have to think that the MLB like people marketing were hoping for like Philly and Houston to take each other on. Now you have the two teams that probably weren't up there on the marketing charts. How do we approach this World Series from that like perspective?
I mean, in a very simple sense, underdogs play. I think the one issue you might run into is it feels like there's two underdogs and there's never two underdogs. Obviously, Arizona is currently the betting underdog, but as you'll see, I don't think that's accurate. But in any case, I think you can sort of play off of the fact that people really hate Houston and people really hate Philly. And so you can sort of look at these guys as kingslayers in some sense, who are sort of next up, and they slayed this beast that everyone despises, depending on where you're from. So I think there's an angle there, but if I'm a marketing person in the MLB front office, I am probably disappointed. Not only are repeats fun and really rare, but you have two divisive teams that play off competitive energy really well. And that's not to say that the Rangers and Diamondbacks don't. In particular, the Rangers, I think they do as good as anybody, even entering the playoffs. It's not optimal, but as a baseball fan, who I am most concerned about is the baseball fans, not the baseball casuals. This is extremely exciting, and it's good to see two teams that, the Rangers having never won a World Series, and the Diamondbacks, it's been a while, longer than I've been alive. That's always exciting to see, because having, new people step up, having sort of old winners move to the wayside is always refreshing. So,
new stadium in Texas too, so that's a pretty cool deal. I had the chance. I went down to a Cowboys game. I got to see it before it was like completely like built, but certainly was a cool looking place right across the road from Jerry's World. So that's a cool deal. Obviously, being able to play in there. I mean, not that the ballpark in Arlington wasn't a cool park either. I always thought it was a cool park, considering where it was with the grass out in center field. That Cardinals World Series was certainly, and the Giants too. It's like they've been around before. The Ron Washington era was something too for them. And again, like I said, two Kingslayers. I think for traditional baseball people, like obviously, like they recognize what they're being able to watch here. The Diamondbacks aren't a team that haven't been like unfamiliar with success either. Of course, the World Series in '01, but they've had some playoff runs too. I remember they would go like with like the Lou Piniella Cubs they used to play. Like, I'm like dating myself like back when I was like 8-9 years old, like when I was a kid like watching like Stephen Drew and he used to play for the Diamondbacks. Like this is like I'm going way back here, but they've been on runs and that a part of that West. They've always been a solid opposition out there. So I mean, this is like again like unexpected. Yes, is this typically where they like the peak of their success would be 84 and 78? Yeah, I mean they maybe had some 90 and 72 years, but overall this is what you would do at your best you could get from the Diamondbacks. But God, they were a thorn in the side of the West for especially those Dodgers teams and Giants teams that would compete so much and so often for World Series. Like they were a thorn for them for so long. It was such a tough division to compete in out there, but overall making it to the dance, and I'd be like hard pressed to say that I would be like again like I don't want them to go down like, but like at the same time like get another team off that list of teams that have never won a World Series, and the Rangers would certainly be a cool thing. So I think the only teams that are left now that haven't won were the Rockies, the Brewers, the Padres, which is hard for me to believe in the Tony Gwynn era and like saying like the Padres and like the length of their franchise overall. Like they haven't. The Mariners, of course, having a single season, getting all those wins. Ichiro, Ken Griffey Jr. just never came together. Randy Johnson just never came together for them. But man, those throwback Mariners uniforms. I have the hat too with like the green brim. There's something about them. I would root for them. I would post them as America's team as well too if they ever had the opportunity. But the Rays, maybe if you didn't listen to the end, if you didn't wholeheartedly believe in pulling Blake Snell in the 5th inning, you might be in a different position there. Maybe maybe they get crossed off the list too, but the Rangers looking to be a team that crossed themselves off that list and cut it from 6 to 5. We might be talking about from 5 to 4, but different conversation for another day. So we'll kick it off with the true underdogs, I think, of the series. They are on the betting sheet. They have been all along. The Arizona Diamondbacks, which again, great story to make it here. But realistically, how have they made it here overall? We've talked about it a little bit with what they were able to do with the Philly, but just overall, what's the course of this journey been for them?
I mean, the journey obviously is, doesn't need an introduction. It's been up and down. That 9-game losing stretch late in the summer obviously made it look like they were going to fall down and down and down. It didn't seem to be getting any better. But this team is very well managed. They have veteran presences. Evan Longoria, in particular, I think is a cornerstone for that team. I don't think they're where they are without him. And not because he's carrying them on offense. He's really not, but I don't think you can understate his presence. But really for them, when it comes down to keys, as far as what's got them there and what's going to get them to the other side of a World Series and get them a ring, is their bullpen. And I think every year there's sort of this renewed discovery and everyone is surprised all over again. Like, oh my goodness, bullpens are really important in the playoffs. And everyone's like, oh, who could have seen that coming? Like the whole season, their pitchers are throwing 8 innings, and then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, wait, their bullpen is important? That's crazy. It happens every year, and it's happening again this year. Kevin Ginkel really, really stood out to me in Game 7. It looks like a video game. Nobody on either team, I think, had the composure that he did and the electricity that his stuff had on that night. And if he can bring that to 4, 5, maybe 6 more games, I think the Arizona Diamondbacks, as long as they do their job on offense and their starters keep things in check, they're going to be in good shape. It's the same thing with Sewald. Sewald, I think, is a really fascinating pitcher because he's really now demonstrating to a bigger audience of people what modern pitching looks like. And obviously modern pitching has been associated with velo for a long time. But I think people are at large, not just sort of the inner circle of people who have played at a high level of baseball, beginning to understand different pitchers' profiles and different ways to have success on the mound. I know for me personally, I've had the opportunity to catch some pro guys over COVID, some minor league guys. And when you see just the velo gun on their stuff, it's not all that different from, say, a D1 recruit in high school. But when you actually get behind there and catch it, or God forbid hit it, which would be a lot less fun, you start to see something's just different. And it's not really quantifiable until we have the technology that we do. And guys like Sewald have completely outlier fastballs that just make guys miss. It seems simple. It seems like, oh, just set your sights higher on the ball, just get on top of the baseball. But when there's a 93-mile-an-hour optical illusion coming directly at you and you have to swing a 2-pound bat and square it up on a tiny little piece, I can tell you personally, it's really, really difficult. So they're going to have to lean on those guys, particularly Thompson, Ginkel, and Seawald, to keep doing what they're doing. Otherwise, this Rangers team, their offense is hitting their stride, and if they continue to do so, with the Diamondbacks bullpen falling apart, knock on wood, it's going to get ugly. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think like the whole spin rate conversation. I think when we watched Koji Uehara doing what he was doing with a splitter and a fastball, he never even touched 90 and was still blowing pitches by people. Like he had like they said that the spin rate on his, like it's an optical illusion. Like it's impossible for a baseball to rise throwing on a downward plane from the mound. Like statistically, like the ball was rising. That's what the like apparition would be for anybody facing Koji Uehara. It would be a rising fastball and obviously a splitter falling off the table. So to have that same conversation with like, not throwing 100. Not everybody's a Aroldis Chapman, who's also been very, very hittable in his career, especially like when he's not on, like spotting pitches. Like it doesn't matter how hard these guys throw at this level. I think all the hitters are more than well equipped to handle anything up in the hundreds. It's a matter of where you can spot your pitches. Can you outsmart the hitter, and then you have the right control, the right stuff with being able to backdoor people. Like you said, spin rate. Like if it's going, I don't care how fast it's going. If it's going straight, I have more confidence than not that a baseball player is going to be able. Like if you throw a straight fastball down the middle, regardless how fast it is, I still think it's going to be a Major League Baseball player is going to do damage to it. But if you have the spin rate and you have, like you said, you have that when you're catching it and seeing it, there's a certain like kind of magic to it. Yeah, I'm looking at it from that perspective of. It's different, and that's what you need to have. And the same thing with Ginkel. Ginkel, I mean, sub 3 in that bullpen, over 70 strikeouts. His whip was sub 1. I mean, over 60 appearances during the season. He continues to just rack up even more and more in the playoffs, considering what he's been able to do over the run. Like you said, Stones being able to do it in the big moment too. Kind of a Joe Kelly vibe with what I was, in reference to him. Just kind of just goes out and shoves regardless of the moment. Again, like 8 appearances now in the postseason, yet to give up an earned run in said postseason. At least from yet to like 5 holds in a postseason, like legitimate threat out of the bullpen. And like you said, like it's like it goes unsung with what they're able to do out of the bullpen. You're not building a team in the offseason around your bullpen, right? You're not saying like we can really piggyback off of him, but you need to know that you have the right, and that's why you see a lot of the deadline moves and stuff that happen are more of like bullpen trades and like working around that with like the dressing and the final pieces. But yeah, your core is not built around them. But when it comes time, if you have the right pieces in play there, it's going to play a big portion. And like you said, guys eating a lot of innings during the season, you're not doing that in the playoffs. It's kind of like back during Little League when you would like see guys throw like they had the innings limit on people. You throw 6 innings one day, you couldn't just throw the same kid back to back. So in the playoffs, you'd have like one kid pitch 2 innings, another kid pitch 2 innings. So it's kind of the same thing in here where if you have a lot of the reliable arms on a postseason roster, that takes the pressure off your starters and it allows them to not see a starter more than 2-3 times through. I know the death of like a pitcher now, especially with all the analytics, is seeing a guy the 3rd time through, being able to have a bullpen that really takes that heat off. I think is going to be huge for them. So like you mentioned, like the bullpen's going to be a big thing for them to be able to win that World Series. Who do you think overall, like, could be one of those relief pitchers? Who will be their overall hero when it's all said and done? Like, who will be their MVP if they are able to capture another World Series title?
I think it's irresponsible to place that tag on anyone but Ketel Marte. To be a switch hitter and hit at the level he does from both sides is really alarming, because in the playoffs, and you can see it very clearly if you sit down and watch the games, so much of the stock and so much of the strategy is placed by managers in matchups. And when you have a guy who can just dodge those and not only give you a better probability, but also then give you a 16-game hit streak to start his postseason career, which is unheard of, it's really scary. And I think in the Diamondbacks lineup, the way it's structured, the fact that Ketel Marte is not the only guy who is a consistent on-base threat, and it's not just a matter of dodging power guys like you have in the Phillies lineup, I think that makes him even more effective, because he doesn't just have, say, a Nick Castellanos or a Brandon Marsh or a JT Realmuto hitting as backup for him and forcing pitchers to pitch to him. He has probably 7 guys who you just can't pitch around, because even though they may not take you back-to-back every inning like they did against the Phillies in Game 6, they're going to rack up runs on you very fast. if you refuse to pitch to Marte. And I think the other option, perhaps, is Corbin Carroll. Obviously, the NLCS was very up and down for him. Started out really rough, but to have a rookie have the kind of resolve to then go to Citizens Bank Park in a game 6 and 7, and really be the MVP of the last two games of those series. Obviously, Marte overall, but to be the most potent offensive weapon for those last two games, that's a kind of mindset that I really haven't seen in any rookie as long as I've been watching baseball. The only one I can really think of is Yasiel Puig early on in his Dodgers career, some of his playoff moments. But Corbin Carroll is very different from Puig. He's very contained, and I think he's sort of a microcosm of the Diamondbacks as a whole. The moment just doesn't matter. They're measured, they're surgical, they're decisive, and even when things don't go their way, you just can't rock them. A 10-0 game in Game 2 can't rock them. Citizens Bank Park in a Game 6 and 7, that atmosphere just couldn't shake them. So even if things don't go their way, and even if their pitchers and their hitters don't hit their stride in the World Series, and that very well may happen, at the very least you have a team that's probably going to come back next year and not really be too shaken up, because it just seems like nothing can get to them.
Yeah, you have a good culture, and you have young guys that you're able to be building around, not just from an on the field perspective, but in terms of a locker room perspective. Like you said, like on base, Corbin Carroll throughout the postseason, almost 400 OBP. Ketel Marte right behind him at 382. But then you're looking at like the top, like there's like formidable guys that are up in the 300s. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys that are up above 300, and then even you dip down to like 289, 265, and 250 with Herrera, Gurriel, and Alec Thomas, and obviously you have Gabby Moreno too, who being able to hit as a catcher, huge plus. Being able to get on base as a catcher, huge plus, and put together at bats the way he has. I mean, again, tough to pitch to. It's not just a matter of being able to hit with power at this point. If you're forcing pitchers out of the ball game and you're getting to see more pitches at this point in the playoffs, that's truthfully the name of the game at this point, is being able to just get a handle, because it's not a matter of racking up a lot of 10-0 wins. It's a matter of hitting your right spots. If you can work into the right amount of counts, if you can see pitches the right way and get guys on base in moments that you need them to, that's even bigger in the sense of having that resolve, like you said, being able to be mentally capable in these big moments, being able to see enough pitches, get guys on base to do damage in the moments you need them. It's not getting all 10 runs in one go in a game that overall is just here and gone, and any team can respond from. It's being able to know that, time and time again, that they're going to be able to find themselves in the moments, and more often than not at this point, they've been able to come through in those moments. So certainly worth watching, kind of like a team that doesn't even realize how big the moment truthfully can be for them. And it's certainly a team you can see run it all the way to the end, be one of these, again, one of these wild card teams that historically it's not out of like pocket for the wild card teams to do it. It's not like an NFL perspective where it's like it doesn't really run that deep with the wild card teams too often, or any other sport for that matter, the NBA. Like, you don't see a lot of low-seeded NBA teams running it and winning a finals. So baseball's kind of like unique in that sense, but you see the wild cards being able to do as much damage now, be that because of the format now or because of what it used to be where they'd only have one wild card to now having 3. Like I said, we kind of touched upon that, and there'll probably be adjustments to that in the future. But it can kind of lead us into the Rangers as well, too. And again, as a catcher growing up, I was a huge Buster Posey guy. And it's funny because Chris Cautious, who had also joined us in the show last week, was a catcher growing up as well, too. So when I caught growing up, I had a Buster Posey jersey, was a huge fan of him, the Kung Fu Panda. Like, if I had an NL team, the Giants were it. But obviously Bruce Bochy leading the charge and now leading another team too, through an LCS, and now having, I think, the first coach to do it with 3 teams, being able to coach them in the Championship Series. So he's done it again, leading them there, and they're sitting in the driver's seat as at least the betting favorite right now. Do you think that they can capture their first World Series?
Can they? Absolutely. I think the drawback you face with the Rangers is, can you stay as mad at the Diamondbacks as you were at the Astros? I think it's kind of a Phillies perspective. And I'm not trying to say that the Rangers are the AL version of the Phillies. But I think Martin Maldonado could not possibly have been more wrong when he said it was a mistake to poke the bear of the Astros. Because the way I see it, sort of when I correlate the 2 championship series, I think the Astros are similar to the Diamondbacks in the way that they try to play the game without emotion. They don't rely on big stretches. They rely on surgical precision. They rely on small ball at times when your name isn't Yordan Alvarez. They rely on consistency, whereas teams like the Rangers and the Phillies, and this was certainly true in the regular season for the Rangers, relied on hot stretches to get them to where they were. When their hitters were seeing the ball well and when their pitchers were hitting their spots. And then, of course, there were moments where the tide went out and seemingly nothing was there. Now, you have to hope, for the sake of the series being entertaining, that the tide doesn't go out on the Rangers and they continue to be the team that we saw in the Championship Series. But when you do face a team like the Diamondbacks, who they're so annoying. They're so annoying to play against. They pester you, and their pitchers are weird. Their bullpen, they have weird arm slots. Their hitters, they'll bunt, they'll steal. They're just a pest. Will that get to the Rangers early on? That's kind of the question for me. I think the biggest key for the Rangers is going to be their starting pitching. Eovaldi, I think, is a known quantity. I have a lot of faith in him, and I have a lot of faith in Montgomery. They haven't really given us any reason to think that they'll fall apart at any point. You never know, but I think they're sort of known quantities. Dunning has not been fantastic, and Scherzer obviously has a very small sample size. So obviously the Rangers have to win more than 2 games. Will their 2 number 1 starters get 2 starts each? Probably, depending on the pace of the series. I see the series going to 6 or 7 games. But regardless, they need Eovaldi and they need Montgomery to remain resolute like they have been. And they need their alternative guys, namely Scherzer and Dunning, to at least keep them in the ballgame and let their offense take over from there. So that to me is their key.
Yeah, I think Mad Max being a big deal for them, considering like where he does get his start, could be a huge swing game in the series, and maybe not once, but even twice in that, for that matter, considering how Rest goes, where you might have to lean on him quite a bit. And coming back from injury, obviously hasn't been at his peak, but developing that rhythm, you might just get, if you get one stellar start from, you don't know what that's going to be able to do for. I mean, you should know it should be able to really power you if you get what you need out of Eovaldi and Montgomery first time around. Let's say, in a 2-2 series or a 2-1 series, you get to go to Scherzer and you go 3-1. That could be like the swing game you're looking at out of Scherzer, all things considered. And he's been in those moments before, and we've seen it from him. But just, how pitchers just need to be in a certain rhythm. They just can't readjust like that. I mean, I think pitchers are, you should know as a catcher, like they are incredible creatures.
Strange. Especially Mad Max. He didn't get his nickname on accident.
Strange beings. They are incredible creatures of habit, and they just... It's not just has to be that they have to create the day for themselves. It's not that it's not a luck matter. It's just so much has to go right, but on behalf of what they're putting together, that I think that like in terms of like routine and habit, that it's hard to explain. I think it's more of like an if you know type of thing in terms of like who they are up top. Like they're all so different. There's not any one that's alike anybody else. They do everything so uniquely in their own way. But when they're on. Like everybody has, like every pitcher I've known has their ability to do certain things well, and obviously, we've seen Scherzer on the stage do it before, and we'll see if he can find a way to do it again. Adolis Garcia, obviously 4 home runs in the last 5 games of the CS, like that's unheard of. When talking about David Ortiz level stuff, 7 home runs in this postseason. I mean, he defected from Cuba in 2016, signs with the Yomiuri Giants. Later that year, signs with the Cardinals in the minor league. Eventually, he's DFA'd, but as a part of being designated for assignment, you can be traded, you can be outright waived, you can go back to the minors. He was traded to the Rangers, who, and then 2 years later after that, DFA'd him, but said, hey, we still want to check you out in spring training, but can't promise you a roster spot, so we'll see. Comes around to 2021, he hits only 31 homers. Following year, he only hits 27, and now he only has 7 home runs in the postseason. Quite an incredible story overall for them, and that's like, again, like it's like, who do you like? I like as a neutral, like it's like as a true like baseball fan, you're just excited for it because they have the high priced Corey Seager, and they have Semien, who doesn't like the Moneyball A's at the time, and Semien was a member of them, and you have one of the Lows there as well too. I mean, they have a lot of guys too that are certainly worthy of some fandom, and if you're a neutral, someone that you can latch onto. And again, the story of Garcia, I think, has been second to none in terms of the playoffs. You have a whole team of underdogs, but I think if there's an underdog individual, Garcia certainly. But then again, Montgomery too was basically thrown away by the Yankees. So I think it's cool to see that these are 2 teams that where it's like again, this is a team without DeGrom as well too. DeGrom going down with the injury. You can only think of what they would look like if that was the case for them. They were able to respond even throughout not having Jacob deGrom and spending that much money. But not traditionally a big spending team. The Diamondbacks, like I had mentioned before, like Bumgarner, literally he's the highest paid player that's not on the roster, but he's the most money they're shilling out at this point. And like you said, I had in my notes too. Can their pitching and bullpen hold up? I've seen Evaldi do some amazing things in the postseason before. We'll see. I don't think doesn't look like offense is traditionally going to be a problem for them. I think this is more when you look into it as a more of a pitching battle, which again, like to the non-traditional eye, might not be what sells. Which of course, now that I have said that, both teams will proceed to go off for averaging double-digit runs, I'm sure, but I like the idea of a pitching battle in this one, in the bullpen overall too, and I think that if overall I think you give a little bit of the edge in starting pitching maybe to the Rangers, but then overall the bullpen and the Diamondbacks I think battles it out. So I think this is more of a pitching battle than it is a battle of the bats, I should say. But then again, I'm sure they'll prove me wrong within the first game. I'm sure there'll be an eruption of runs all over the place, and both starters will be chased by the second inning. Now that I've said it.
Yeah, I mean, I would generally agree. I don't think you can count out Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly, though. I think Zach Gallen, it's hard to get a read. I think pitching at Citizens Bank Park isn't fun. I'll leave it at that. But at any point, I think it's not out of the question that Gallen sort of reassumes that Cy Young form. There were times in this regular season where he really, truly looked unhittable. And his off-speed stuff being so devastating against a Rangers team that, like the Phillies, hit really well against the fastball. It could play well for him. And then, of course, we talked about the Arizona bullpen. But on the Rangers end, I do have to wonder about their bullpen. Obviously, Jose Leclerc has been very up and down. At times, he's looked like the best closer in baseball. At times, he's looked like Craig Kimbrell. But, you don't really know what you're going to get, and I don't know how much faith I have in the Rangers bullpen relative to the Diamondbacks bullpen. You have to hope that their starters take some of the pressure off of them and get long innings like they have in, the prior series. But only time will tell. Yeah, I don't know. I could also see this being a shootout, given that the Diamondbacks offense is clicking at the right time. Also, given how many runs the Rangers put up on the Astros, I think there's a very real chance that this could really blow up in a way that's exciting, but maybe a little less interesting to somebody who's more interested in the strategy between, in my opinion, two of the best managers in the game right now. So we'll see. Yeah,
I give all the credit in the world, like I said, to Bochy, because of just how impressive that resume is, and overall what he's able to do with those Giants teams. It was just downright impressive. I mean, you start to wonder too, as the postseason. Now we're at the last stage. Like, you're really pulling out all the stops. You start to see more starters head to the bullpen. You'll probably see guys pitching the ability to pitch on short rest. And again, as a game of strategy goes on, like, what starters do you pull to the bullpen? Like, you might have your 3 or 4 guy. Maybe you're like, oh no, we need him out of the pen tonight. Then you need a guy that's making pretty much a spot start considered considering the postseason to be more of a spot start because you're at the end of the rotation. You probably weren't expecting to use this guy considering the days of rest you get. Do you have guys going on short rest? I think that's going to come into it too. Niedervaldi's proved that he can do that before. I mean, you got guys that have pitched in high pressure moments like Kelly, in terms of, like you said, in terms of the World Baseball Classic. So I think it's certainly an interesting matchup. I think overall, like, strategy being it overall, especially with like the new wave of baseball, I think is really cool. 2 deserving teams that should be here. I mean, amongst all of them that made the playoffs, and like I said, all the 100-win teams going down, you get to see 2 teams that never really, I don't think, probably, the only people that probably thought they were going to be there were themselves, which I think is impressive in its own right. We don't get to see that too often, so I'm certainly buckling my seatbelt for a fun series. But closing it down with the betting picks, we'll see. So we got winner, MVP, and then we get the props. So how many games the series will go, pitcher with the most strikeouts, hitter with the most home runs, and then 2 last questions with, will any player have a multi-home run game, and will there be a grand slam in the series? So I'll let you kick it off. Who are you predicting to be your winner?
I like the Diamondbacks. I'm biased, but I think, and I have to qualify this with, if the Diamondbacks do win, I think it is almost certainly in 6 or in 7 games. I think this sort of reaches back to what I said about their adaptability. They obviously have a small sample size on the Rangers, being an L team, so it would not surprise me at all if we saw something similar to the CS where they come out and get slapped in the face. That's a very realistic outcome for me. But if they can continue to adapt and gather data really fast and make adjustments really fast, I don't know if the Rangers can overcome that. I don't know if them also having a smaller sample size on the Diamondbacks, if that's something that they can surmount. So I have the Diamondback.
My brain is definitely going to take, I think if it was, again, betting-wise, I'm taking the Diamondbacks to win the series as well, especially for where the money's at in terms of like who's favored right now, because the Rangers are favored. But my heart just wants them to be crossed off the list of first-time World Series winners. That being the thing, would I go with that just to play devil's advocate here? Like I'm personally going to take the Diamondbacks too, not just for the sake of agreeing, but overall, just like I'll go with the devil's advocate here with the Rangers too. Not to throw shade at Lavulo, Bochy's a guy who has been there before at the helm. This is a franchise that, of course, the Diamondbacks having won it before, but having more of the recent, I think, success in terms of going to World Series, but none of these guys being a part of that, so that doesn't typically factor in, but I guess, sometimes with the fan expectations and such too, that being the case, and yeah, I just think the power of that first World Series championship could certainly take them, but the Adolis Garcia factor, and you have the Evaldis of the world, like there's, again, maybe more of a veteran presence in that sense too, where you got guys who have seriously sacked up in big moments that I think that, not that the Diamondbacks have proven that they couldn't, but you have some serious veteran leadership over there as well too, like that we've seen on that stage before. So I don't know. I just think personally with my brain, the Diamondbacks have been so responsive, never say die kind of team that it's hard for me to pick against them in this moment. Like they've made it this far. Like what's stopping them now? Especially if they deal with anything now. Like I think they've seen everything they're going to see from a perspective of adversity, and I think they've responded to all of it. So I'd find it hard to bet against them, but trying to just look at the other side of what the Rangers have to offer too. Certainly on their run defeating a great franchise, a dynastic franchise in the Astros, being able to get here. We'll see. Certainly both having overcame odds. Now looking at the series MVP. So, now we both picked the Diamondbacks. It'll be a Diamondbacks player first, but I guess we can basically swing it. You've already said that Ketel Marte would probably be your MVP pick, for the Diamondbacks. So I guess it's for me, I'll just go with Adolis Garcia if it's going to be the Rangers or Corbin Carroll. We've touched on our two favorites there, but I'd say I'd be hard pressed to see if the Rangers win it. Who else is going to take it? Seager could, because Seager's probably the most talented guy on that squad, but again, I'd say a sleeper pick in Evaldi to be able to take it, because that's a guy who I could see going on short rest in a big moment and shoving on short rest, which could certainly get him an MVP. But that'd be my sleeper pick. But I'd say Adolis Garcia would have to be my MVP pick in this situation, at least for the Rangers.
Yeah, I think Marte is a safe pick, but I think Carroll probably has an equally good chance given the momentum he has coming out of Game 7, going, I think, 3 for 3 with a sac fly, 2 stolen bases. That's a crazy stat line in a Game 7. That's insane to just not fluctuate, to not falter a single time under that pressure. So I could see him carrying that success over into the series. I could also see Moreno taking that spot too. I think any of those top 3 hitters for the Diamondbacks at any given point could just absolutely take over a game, because all of them, aside from being so talented, have just been so consistent, and they just find the barrel.
Yeah, we'll see how it'll play out overall. Like I said, it could be a couple shootouts too. You got to think that they're both playing in indoor settings too, which I think that's going to factor into it with a lot with the pitching too. Both playing in indoor settings, you're not going to have the cold winter air, so offense certainly could be a little more prevalent in that sense. And I think that they're both talented lineups in their own right in terms of guys that get on base and see pitches as well too. Because you look at the Rangers too, with even the Josh Jungs of the world and the Nate Lowe's of the world, their OBP is ridiculous throughout this playoff setup. They've been able to do damage, and I've had the time hitting as well, which is no mistake that they end up here. That's the stuff that I'm saying that of course you could probably infer by the fact that they've made it this far. But again, I just love the story of Garcia. I would say if it's not him, I would say Seager, and if I'd had to make a third pick, I said Evaldi. All things considered, I could see a pitcher. There's only certain pitchers I can see getting it, and it's a guy like Evaldi that could just sack up on 2 days rest and still throw 6 innings of a quality start. I've seen it before as a Sox fan. He just has a way with doing it. So that would not shock me at all, even if it ends up being a pitcher in a series where we're looking at pitcher. Maybe I couldn't say I mean, even sleeper Ginkel. I mean, Ginkel's up, 5 holds this postseason? Like, say he goes out and he has 3 holds in a World Series that they win, in 6 games, like, to have holds in 3 out of the 4 games, like, or something like that. You could, a relief pitcher would seem to be kind of wild, but considering the postseason that he's had,
yeah.
I mean, like,
yeah.
I'm sure the betting odds would be far against me there, and I'm probably just talking nonsense there too. But to have say he goes like 3 innings in relief and like an extra inning game or something, like there's certain situations where you can see a guy that's been so statistically successful throughout this postseason, because again, he hasn't even given up an earned run this postseason, which is insane. So to have that many holds, not have any earned runs given up, like, again, if he continues that pace, that's something where I could see, from the top rope, something crazy. Shane O'Mac diving down there, maybe.
He's that good. It's going to be a matter of game script in that situation. But he's that good. And I think Zach Allen, has to be a dark horse too. I think he's probably pissed that he wasn't the guy in that championship series. And the Rangers lineup is a lineup I think that he could have success against, given that they have so much success against the fastball. Which, obviously the Phillies were in that same boat too. But I think we'll see an angrier Gallen, and I think we'll see a more driven Gallen, and his stuff, frankly, is probably the best between both teams when he's feeling best. So
now the next prop we're looking at is most home runs in the series, which is interesting overall, because you have the Diamondbacks are pretty evenly spread out throughout this entire postseason run, and not any like tremendous like pop guys. I mean, they have good hitters that I think can do it, but they don't have any like the Adolis Garcias of the world that have been able to do it. But also, I mean, Seager, not a traditional power guy, but still finds a way to put the ball over the fence too. I mean, all things considered, who do you think will lead the way in home runs in this series if you were to be a betting man?
I don't sports bet, but I think the only responsible bet is Adolis Garcia. I don't think that surprises anybody. I think if you pick anybody else, then you're looking for trouble. But if we were to pick somebody on the Diamondbacks, I'm watching Christian Walker. I think that Walker obviously has struggled so far in the playoffs, and he's been sort of the one among the Diamondbacks to not really find his stroke yet. I'm not really a big believer in the whole being due thing, but in a certain sense, he kind of is. And if you look at the Rangers' rotation, it's a rotation that's built really heavily around off-speed stuff, which is where he thrives. He struggles against the fastball and against guys like Nola and guys like Wheeler, who are really fastball heavy. He struggled in the Phillies bullpen, same way. Soto, Dominguez, all of those guys. So against a Rangers team that typically relies more so on their off-speed stuff between Evaldi splitter, Montgomery slider, it would not completely shock me. I'd be surprised, but it would not completely shock me if on the Diamondbacks end of things, Walker stepped it up a notch and found himself in some clutch situations and drove that home run number up.
Fair deal. I'm gonna go. I would have to go with Garcia too. I've said so many good things about him, but I like that little sleeper pick thrown in there. I said Seager too. He's got some pop to him too in those moments too, where I can definitely see it. Where if Garcia, kind of dropped off a little bit, where Seager might find his run. But did we go through most strikeouts yet, or did I just totally skip?
Nope.
I just totally skipped
most
the
strikeouts,
first two props. Just totally skipped the first. Like you've said, 6 to 7 games. So yeah,
Yes.
I'm gonna bet 6 games myself. If I would have bet it like total games at 6.
Yep.
I don't know if it's totally going 7. I'm gonna say 6. Both these teams have played in some lengthy series so far. So will they be able to rally after going down 3-2? I'm not too sure, considering how much they've been through. But then again, they both overcame a lot too to get to where they're at. I'd say most strikeouts for a pitcher. I'm gonna go sleeper. Scherzer's gonna get a deal, and man, he's gotta find like. The thing is, like, sometimes I bet based off of what needs to happen for a team, and I think for the Rangers to win their first World Series, they need a big, not just like any performance of Max Scherzer, they need a legitimate shutdown performance, either to knot up the series or to take a legitimate advantage and start a game clinching, like go to a game clinching game where they can start Evaldi or Montgomery. So I'm gonna go with Max Scherzer for my pick, just because I think that's what more so than anybody else, like, they need him to do that. So that's why I'm gonna bet it personally. But again, I'm interested to see what you have there for most strikeouts as well too.
I'm gonna take the flip side of that, and while I will preface by saying that Eovaldi and Gallen are the obvious picks, I'm gonna take a sleeper on the Diamondback side and say Brandon Pfaadt. Brandon Pfaadt scares me as a Phillies fan. I don't understand how a guy who spent most of his season in AAA shut us down the way he did. Then it also doesn't surprise me because we have no footage of this guy. He's elusive. And obviously the Rangers are going to see these playoff starts and they're going to work off of those. But the fact is, Brandon Pfaadt has as good of a slider changeup pairing as just about anybody on either staff. His stuff is there, and the big question in the championship series is he going to be up for the moment? And the short answer is, yeah, he was. He was. And he was as consistent a guy as the Diamondbacks have had so far this postseason. And conveniently, whereas Gallen and Kelly, I think, are more prone to soft contact, and that obviously works in their favor often, Pfaadt is very much a strikeout pitcher. He has both fastballs working. He has a slider changeup pairing that was really devastating for the Phillies lineup. And I'd be surprised if it wasn't for the Rangers too. So my sleeper pick is going to be Brandon Pfaadt.
Fair deal. And now we got, will there be a multi-homer game? Will any player have a multi-homer game? I guess you could say yes or no and then give your prediction of a player. I mean, I'm not going that far because the odds on that must be ridiculous. And then will there be a grand slam as well? So a little two-parter. I'd say, will there be any player to have a multi-homer game in this series?
I'm going to say no. Both pitching staffs have been very good, obviously. I know that the Diamondbacks had that moment in Game 2 versus the Phillies, where they gave up those 6 home runs. I think it was 6. They gave up a lot of home runs. But I think they've made adjustments since then, and I would be pretty surprised if Rangers came out of the gate in the way that the Phillies did in Game 1 and 2 and put up those multi-homer games. So I'm going to say no.
I'm gonna agree with it because the only player I could see doing it is a guy like Garcia who's been so hot, and I just cannot see him. Like, he could stay hot, but like having another go at it again like he's had in recent times, I just can't see like him continuing to do that. And I like both of these teams the way they've been able to what they've done down the stretch. They haven't done so much at once. Like, they haven't I think exploded, but they've just hung so tough. And I think that like both of that both ways, I just don't see either team really truthfully running away with any of these games. I think they're going to be hard fought, close games overall. So again, I could see Garcia maybe doing it, but unsure if he'll be able to repeat said success that he's had in the past. So last question before we close this one out. Will there be a grand slam in the series? Of course, the Rangers found themselves in a position in the late stages of a ball game where they needed one, and I've seen it before. Again, David Ortiz is so you think of playoff baseball, and as a Red Sox fan, there's just nothing that comes to mind like David Ortiz. So I will be endless in my references to David Ortiz. But do you think there will be a grand slam in this World Series?
I think probably. I think yes, and I think it will be by the Diamondbacks. The main reason being that top 3 with Carroll, Marte, and Moreno, they've been so effective at getting on base. And not only that, they've been so effective at not hitting home runs that it seems like the middle and bottom part of the Diamondbacks lineup is in a relatively good position probabilistically to hit a grand slam here. So I'd look for them to string together a few hits, and then somebody like Walker, somebody like Gurriel in particular, who's swinging a hot bat right now, to cash that in. So I'll say yes.
Fair deal. So, betting out of the way, I think both of us pretty much, Diamondbacks. Well, either way, it's going to be a serious matchup that I think it's going to be fun to watch. It's been, the rest of the postseason has been enjoyable to watch for sure too. So, it's been exciting overall. Outside of the fact that the Red Sox didn't make it, so I guess it's been a little easier for me. Other than, I'm not a Phillies fan, so I can probably less mourning for me to do. So, there's that. Not throwing. Not throwing you under the bus there, just felt for you when I saw it when they went up, and
it's nothing new. Like, you have to remember that this is, since 2019, I think there has only been disappointment. There's only been false hope and disappointment. So we don't need any pity over here in Philly because it's all we know.
Fair. But Andrew, I appreciate you joining me. This won't be the last time. I hope that we'll have more time on this too, and hopefully come spring, if all goes well, a baseball broadcast. I'd love to call play-by-play, have you as the analyst.
Yes.
That would be peak existence right there at Holy Cross. I think the production crew. I think that would be peak baseball.
I'd have a good time. Yeah, I'd love to talk college baseball soon coming up once we have a once it becomes a not too early college baseball podcast, once
Yeah.
it sort of transcends that label, I'd love to get into it because it should be a fun season. But yeah, I really appreciate you having me on. Had a really good time, and I'll be slightly less nervous for this World Series, if nothing else, because I have no stock in it. But go Birds, go Birds.
So for Andrew, I'll have all this stuff linked up in the description. I'll have him tagged in the post as well, so you guys can follow him on social media. But I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Andrew, appreciate you coming on. But until next time, I'll see you guys later.